Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond Expo. And for this panel, we'll be talking about the next blue ocean for hardware companies in the metaverse. So joining us today are Mr. Suchi, who's the founder and CEO of Nreal. And also we have Mr. Alvin Wang Graylin, who's the president of HTC China. Hello, both. You know, we both go, we all three of us go way back, actually. So it's very good to see you, albeit in online form. So why don't we start off with talking about what your companies have been up to lately? Because obviously in the past 2 or 3 years or so, we've all been dealing with COVID. But I think it's safe to say that things are starting to get back to normal. But I was wondering, have your companies been changing your strategy lately with your hardware related to VR and AR lately? Why don't we start off with Suchi? I know your company's been releasing the Nreal. Well, actually, you're about to release the Nreal Air in the US. So, this is slightly different to the Nreal Lite, which you released in the US last November, I believe. So, tell us about what changes you've been making, or if these changes have anything to do with COVID.
Well, okay. Actually, the entire conversation for Nreal happens, during the COVID period. So it is quite challenging for us because, we are relatively a smaller team, and we have to deal with, launching at different countries during COVID, but we don't have enough people, or we don't have enough people locally to do so. So luckily, with the help of different carriers in their countries, we'll be able to really get some strength from them to help us launch this, in different countries. And we do realize that because of the COVID, especially at early times, it is hard for us to go to the local stores to gather the feedbacks from the customers and to kind of assemble those kind of campaign that. Especially offline campaigns to attract different customers. But, all in all, I guess, that's also the opportunity for us because, people cannot go out too much. So they would love to actually browse online, especially, to find out some cool gadgets. And I think, VR, AR, definitely get some boost out of that because people cannot go outside. And a lot of companies, I think, take this opportunity. And you instantly have a chance to kind of lower the cost for those customers, try something new. And if they like it, they'll stick to it. So that's why you see a really boost for VR and AR in general for the last couple of years. And I still consider that trend gonna keep continue, even after the COVID period.
So would you say the adoption rate is still going up steadily despite COVID hopefully going relative downhill, so to speak?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What about Alvin? Well, would you say you saw the same kind of observation? I know, obviously for Alvin, your main focus is in China. Tell us about what your company's been up to recently, and what kind of adoption rate are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give specifics of operational data, but I think it's clear that over the last couple of 3 years, there's two major trends, right? One is what's happening with the COVID situation globally, and the COVID situation actually creating, I think, an acceleration for adoption and interest in the whole XR metaverse space. And then the other major trend is I guess the heat and hype around this metaverse concept. So the two actually coming together, I think is creating a new inflection point for this industry, both in terms of customers' interest to adopt, as well as investors' interest to put more money to work in this space, and entrepreneurs and content creators wanting to get into this space. So a combination of these things happening, I think it's really actually just accelerating the entire industry forward because of these two trends kind of coalescing around the same time. And we see similar types of added benefits both in China as well as globally. So overall, I think we're actually quite happy with where things are headed, and we've released completely new generations of products in our Pro line, in our standalone line, and then late last year, our kind of thin and light these kind of Vive Flow cameras, Vive Flow HMD devices. So I think, now that the devices are, getting to a point where they're much more accessible, much more comfortable, it really opens up a new class of customers that used to not be open to using these devices. And I think that's going to help, bring in new customer base and expand the overall market. And what we also see is that right now, we started this trend of releasing standalones with the Pancake, and right now we see, pretty much every major vendor around the world following that trend. So we're continuing to be a trendsetter and innovator in this space.
It is interesting seeing how, so you briefly showed off the Vive Flow, very nice plug there. And obviously Sushi with Nreal, you've also got the Nreal Air. So these are both very portable headsets, but I'd like to know how your different segments tie into the metaverse experience. Do you think your users would most likely use the lightest available option to join the metaverse, or is it still for the more, I would say, maybe prosumer users who want the higher quality experience that they can get from the slightly more advanced but potentially bulkier units? Alvin, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think we actually need to kind of go back a step, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding of what the metaverse is.
Sure.
And even by your question, you're saying to use this to join the metaverse, assuming that the metaverse is already here. I think it's important to kind of set the stage and say, hey, the metaverse is something that is coming, and it's going to take 5 to 10 years for it to be realized in terms of having a fully interoperable open world concept where people can get into any device, whether a AR device or a VR device or a 2D screen, and be able to go into any of these 3D virtual worlds with a common ID, with common assets that they bring with them, right? That's really what the metaverse promises. And it's kind of the next generation of the internet. It's not something so mysterious, because a lot of people, everybody you talk to has a different definition. And I think the easy way to think about this is the metaverse is the 3D version of the internet that we've been building for the last 30 or 40 years. And it's mostly going to be consumed in the future in XR devices. But in the near term, actually, most people will probably consume it on their PC or on their phone or on their tablets, because that's what devices are out there in the world. But as time goes on, we'll see that the more and more people will migrate to a more immersive experience, right? So I think that's something that I wanted to clarify in terms of at least having a common definition of what the metaverse is.
Alvin is certainly a very good, I don't know if evangelist is the right word, but you're definitely very good at being the, gatekeeping on the definition here. Sushi, how about you? Where does Nreal come in when it comes to the metaverse experience?
Well, I totally agree with Alvin about, I think, metaverse is, however you call that, it is like the 3D version of the internet. And internally, we would like to call that spatial internet. I think, that is kind of like the next phase of the mobile internet. So we also think that's also like 5 to 10 years ahead of us. And we need to find at different phases, we need to find out what is the best use cases for that kind of the internet. For example, if you look at the mobile internet, it also breaks down to different phases. At early stage, people only connecting to each other, like they use WeChat, they use WhatsApp. But in the later stage, when the bandwidth is not a problem, we see a lot of video kind of contents, like short video and the streaming services and etc. So I think the early stage of this spatial internet or 3D internet will be also more and more immersive kind of video contents all over the places. So that's still kind of like a kind of enhanced version of the mobile internet, that you have more contents, you have more high definition contents around you. And in that sense, all the content is more likely going to be 3D, and the interaction going to be more intelligent. So that's why we think VR and AR going forward is going to be the pivoting kind of the portal, the next computing platform for this kind of content. So it's gonna take some time, but we really see some, really encouraging kind of use cases that people love to use on a daily basis right now, like, media consumption, like, kind of productivity kind of contents. So if I think, VR, AR in the near future, they can find some good use cases that people would love to put decent time onto that on a daily basis. They have a very good chance, and slowly you're gonna see more and more content, kind of migrating from mobile internet to Metaverse, and you'll see more and more people using it.
Well, have you personally seen any memorable use cases so far?
Well, I would say, media consumption is already a very, very powerful kind of use cases. For example, say we always wanna enjoy a movie on the plane that have a kind of IMAX type of screen. And that's not actually existing, cell phone or any other devices can bring you except for VR and AR.
Okay. Alvin, what about you?
Yeah, so I think we also, because the metaverse isn't here yet, I don't want to say, is there a existing use case of the metaverse, right? But I think, well, maybe what you're asking is, what are some existing XR use cases that relate to it? And a lot of people, I think, take the metaverse to be more of a social use case. So probably the top social platform for XR today is VR chat. So and HTC is actually the biggest shareholder for VR chat. So we've been with them, involved with the operation for many years, and we've seen their growth. The one thing that's very interesting to note about them is, when we first invested, they were probably 90% of their users were PC users that were non-VR, and 10% were VR users. And what we found is that over the last 2 or 3 years, it's actually been kind of a flip. It's now probably 70–80% of their users now are actually using XR devices, and only about 10 to 20% are using PCs. So we're seeing that as users start to use and see the benefits of a more immersive experience, and start to see the value of a full body tracked experience, they want to be able to have that first class citizen experience, right? If you're on a 2D device and you can't move your arms and hands, and you can't jump and dance like the other people, you feel like, hey, I'm a second class citizen in this world. I need to express myself. And so I think that's actually a very good use case, because if you look at, this team is a team that, was in the low single digits when we invested in them. Now they're probably just in the dozens of people, but they have more active users than the Horizon world, which is, powered by billions of dollars behind it. Meta spent a lot of money to build it, right? And it's also a lot higher usage than things like Decentraland and Sandbox, which are seen as or being called metaverse platforms, but the reality is that there just aren't very many users on there. If you look at some of the stats recently, people are saying it's 1,000 users per day or 1,000 users per week on these Web3 metaverse platforms. Right? So I think a lot of the platforms that call themselves metaverse today are not metaverses, and they're using it as more of a marketing term than a actual use case. So really helping the audience understand the difference between a Web3 platform and also a metaverse platform, because I think that there's also a lot of conflating between the two. And the blockchain solutions that call themselves metaverse, pretty much most of them are decentralized financial platforms, and some are social platforms, but none of them are true metaverses, because they're all walled garden systems, right? They're locked into, the users are locked into those systems. Whatever property or land or avatars they have are only used in those spaces, and that's not what the metaverse promises. The metaverse should be a place where you can easily jump between different worlds, and between different vendors, and between different devices. So it's important for us not to conflate the Web3 definition of the metaverse with I think, more longer term, spatial internet that Shitsu and I have been talking about.
Okay, well, hold that thought for a second. I just want to go back to Suchi and ask if Nreal is currently working with any of those so-called metaverse platforms at the moment, and then I'll jump back to Alvin.
Well, for us, I still think, Metaverse is like, 5 to 10 years ahead of us. So, but we are building a kind of a computing platform that is getting ready to more and more 3D contents. So I think initially, if you want to have a kind of platform really can hold those kind of 3D content, you go back down to the fundamentals, like, if you have a decent 3D display and 3D good sensing about the environment and also 3D interaction. So if you have those 3 key elements and you actually end up having a lot of customers are willing to use a new kind of platform compared to the cell phone, you're going to see more and more people migrating. You're going to see a faster trend of people migrating from the mobile internet to the spatial internet or metaverse. So that's what we are focusing right now, is how we're really building a decent kind of computing platform that can track people, that can attract more and more people coming from the mobile internet. And we want the people to get rid of the cell phone right away, because that's what people been using for the last 15 years. So we want to have like a great complement to what they've been using for the last decades, that we give them an enhanced kind of experience when they plug our glasses onto their cell phones. So that's how Unreal Air has been working, is we have a really handy kind of glasses that you can easily tether to a cell phone or even some other computing units like Xbox or a laptop. It instantly became a really decent 3D display in front of you and has much better resolution color compared to previous kind of headsets. Once people get used to that, you're gonna see more and more 3D content is gonna flow in, and that's what we think gonna drives and cracks, I guess, the first kind of customer for the 3D contents, and others gonna follow.
What do you mean by 3D display though? Are you just talking about a fully immersive experience, or are you talking about specific 3D display technologies?
Okay, so we're talking about near eye displays, right? So compared to the display technology we've been using for the cell phones, for the TV headsets, for the TVs, right? So the AR and the VR, we have to display true 3D contents. So so that means the both eye gonna actually display slightly different contents, and making sure that it's very accurate actually requires more kind of it actually is more complicated kind of operating system, and we call that, we actually have a brand new optical display engine that is driving the entire thing out of this. And so that's, we think, what compares to the traditional 2D flat screen type of a display, we're building something slightly different.
Yeah, so maybe I can add to that a little bit. I think from a 3D display and 3D content perspective, there's definitely the left and right eye having the parallax. But I think beyond that is the ability to actually move spatially within a 3D space and have it be real-time rendered. And so you're able to see, let's say the back of an object that you're looking at, or of a person you're looking at, or being able to move around in a larger 3D space. I think that ability is something that you don't get in video today. It's not an ability that you don't get even with a 3D TV or 3D movie. All you're doing is really being in a fixed place. So the ability to move around and have that 6 degrees of freedom, I think that's really one of the key aspects of what the future metaverse will allow you to provide to people, because then you have an immersive experience. And when you have an immersive experience, you're actually creating in your brain real memories that are very similar to the type of things that you provide or create when you go and do things in the real world. And that allows you to remember things better. It allows you to appreciate the content better, and it allows you to connect better with people, with other people who are in these social spaces. So having that ability to spatially recognize the space. They should recognize other people. To be able to interact with your hands and your body is actually very under-recognized in terms of its value to deliver information to an audience.
I can also imagine that being a critical component for your VR training experiences as well. So I guess that could become a potential commercial use case in the metaverse, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I think training has been a consistent VR use case for the last 7-8 years since we started selling these products. But I think the concept of really educating in general, whether it's training for business or training for children's education or adult education, there's really no other medium that is more effective in terms of delivering a full brain learning experience outside of actually physically doing it in the real world. So having that and creating actually muscle memory and creating actual habits, right? I'll give you an example. We recently did a study in terms of safety training for construction workers. And one of the tests that they had was, when you walk outside of a covered area, you always look up first before you walk out. And we would actually have a virtual object drop on this person if they don't look up. Right? And if they look up, then they see it dropping, and they can back up a little bit. And what the testers wanted to show was, does this training translate to real behavior on the construction zone after they get out? And we had people who did these training and ones who were just given kind of verbal training with an instructor. And it was 2 or 3 times more effective in terms of getting people to practice that habit once they saw something fall on them, and they would instantly react by jumping back, right? So I think this is something that no matter what type of training, whether you're talking about empathy training, we've been working with the police department in the US with Axon. They're the guys who make the taser devices. So we actually put a tracker onto these tasers, on the physical tasers. So they train the muscle memory of holding these devices and where all the triggers and buttons and loading and where all these things happen. And they get put into a virtual scenario of how, when they would use it, how they would use it, and also to be on the other side of that taser so that they feel empathy for the people that is getting tased. So I think those are the kind of things that need to be understood in terms of the value of having an immersive experience or immersive training in terms of changing attitude and then changing behavior from that attitude.
Wow, that's very interesting. Actually, this is probably my first time hearing about the taser being, taser training being part of the, the package, so to speak. And so, Sushi, I've actually been meaning to ask you. It's, to me, it seems like Nreal is still mainly targeting the consumer market. But I was wondering if you've also been considering, or maybe you are working with in the B2B segment as well, on maybe things related to training or things like that, or retail.
Okay. So first of all, we still put some effort into the market beyond the consumer market. It is, when we build our own hardware, it's like our focusing is building a hardware that is dedicated to the consumer use cases. But in the meantime, we believe those hardware, they're good enough for a lot of trading or some other kind of B2B use cases as well. So for instance, because, our stunning display, we do realize with 6-hour tracking, it became a great kind of computing platform for some museum. They have some new type of arts media they want to showcase, and for other kind of interacting sightseeing kind of experience, we see a very good use case in Tokyo where you can see dinosaurs with glasses, and compare kind of align this with the existing materials in the museum. Everything became more vivid, and actually the kids really loves that, because this is like the first time only you can find an interactive way you can play with the dinosaurs, and that's something I think is really good. And on the other hand, you see a lot of use cases where people putting the glasses on the same scene, instantly you kind of flash back to 100 years ago with the vintage people kind of showing up at the same places. And
Time machine.
Yeah, it's kind of like a deja vu, right? And those kind of use cases, they are actually using real light, which is a kind of device is dedicated for the consumer, but you can still see a very decent amount of use cases coming for that.
And those were used by museums, shops, or just regular? Okay.
Well, we actually end up having over 20,000 developers around the world. They are actually gathering together and trying to figure out what are the new use cases that we can get out of the VR and AR in general.
I see. Now, Alvin, let's go back to the metaverse, so to speak, very briefly. You spoke about how a true metaverse should be totally interoperable, right? And it has to be, at least it should not be wall guarded, right? So HTC has the Viveverse. So Alvin, can you tell us more about what HTC is trying to achieve by having its own, metaverse platform? Like, what are you trying to achieve with this? Having your own platform that I guess it's a metaverse experience.
Yeah. So actually, I think it's important to point out that Viveverse is not necessarily kind of the wall garden platforms that people are looking at. What we're actually creating is the tool set to allow content creators to create their own platforms and to have a more standardized model for content creators and users to cooperate. And it's built actually on OpenXR and WebXR, which means that you can take any browser on any device and be able to go on there and interact, and it can actually jump to any other WebXR destination. Right, just like the internet right now, if I go to a website and I click a link, I can jump to another website. I don't have to re-log in. I don't have to create a new ID. I don't have to change devices. That's the kind of, we're essentially trying to set an example of what we believe a more open, interoperable metaverse should feel and look like. And in fact, we're also creating and adopting a portable avatar system using the VRM standard, so that once you have your avatar, you can bring it with you to different locations. So as long as people follow these standards, then they don't have to re-register. They don't have to create another avatar when they go somewhere, right? So those are the kind of things, and we also allow for currency and wallet logins across multiple worlds, and that way. If you had, whether it's cryptocurrency or fiat currency, you can use it to purchase things across different worlds, right? So what we're doing is to create the toolkits to enable people to build towards this metaverse, this interoperable open metaverse. We're not trying to create another closed wall garden that a lot of platforms are trying to do. And I think from a company perspective, I fully understand why these companies want to create closed platforms, because that's the best way to kind of capture the value of their customer. But if we look at if you look at history, and you see when the internet started, there was wall gardens like AOL or CompuServe or Prodigy, which all call themselves internet solutions, right, or platforms, and you see that they've all disappeared. Right. So in the long run, an open interoperable type of a network is always going to be more valuable than closed systems. And we feel like that also delivers the most value to the users and to the world in general. So rather than trying to create a system that captures all the value short term, what we would like to do is to enable the world to have the greatest value, the greatest public good, because I feel like the metaverse is a public good, and we should try to do our part to enable that to happen. And we're working with all of the standards organizations around the world today to help get people to come to a standard as quick as possible, so that we, on the internet, we have things like, TCP/IP and DNS and SMTL and all these things, so that, HTML, so that you can have very consistent content creation and very consistent mobility between worlds, and also very consistent packet delivery between different networks, right? And I think those are the kind of things that needs to happen also to make the metaverse that we would like to see.
But has this been a challenging journey? I'm wondering if you're able to list out some of the main obstacles to convince.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always challenging to try to get hundreds of companies and also policymakers to agree on anything, right? Even getting a team of a company within internally to agree on something can be difficult, but getting multiple companies with multiple priorities and interests to agree on something is very difficult. But I think the good thing is that market forces long term will push us towards this open metaverse, because I don't know if you know Metcalfe's law. It's the value of a network is the square of its nodes, right? And so that's true for a regular kind of local area network. It's also true for the internet, and it will be true for the metaverse. So as we create a more open world, as we create a more interoperable world, the number of nodes and the number of users are going to be significantly higher. And that significantly higher will square that number. So, a 1 million person world versus a 10 million person metaverse, it's not going to be 10 times more. It's going to be 100 times more valuable, right? So I think more of these companies will want to be part of this open metaverse over time. And these forces, it will take time, but these forces, market forces, will bring them together.
Cool. Now, Suchi, you obviously, you being the CEO of the company, you personally, I would imagine you personally have to talk to people from the US and well, you mentioned Japan as well. I was wondering if you've discussed with them about this upcoming metaverse experience, or the true metaverse world, so to speak. I was wondering if you've observed any differences between the way these different countries or different audiences see what the metaverse is meant to be.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, I would say not only Japan and US and China, and when even you talk to, South Korea, and actually different country, they have different policies. And, I think, all of them really, really recognize metaverse like a really big opportunity for their country to build a kind of a new force of the economies. So different countries are taking different strategies, and that's why you see the markets actually are at different paces. Especially, for example, if you look at South Korea, I think they're being really aggressive. And not surprisingly, because if you look at 3G or 4G or other kind of innovations, South Korea always are leading the way. And in China, I think, they are a much, much bigger market. So they're being more cautious. And especially, in China, when you're talking about Web3, it is very early stage, and both the government and the market are taking some time to fully understand that. They don't want to, you see some companies are taking actions ahead of time, but you still see a lot of other companies, they are just, holding for now and trying to wait the right opportunity to jump in. And luckily, you actually see more and more companies are starting investing in this area already. And you actually see more and more companies are actually getting into the metaverse by, starting off with, building a good AR and VR headset. For example, ByteDance just, acquired a Pico last year. I think that kind of make a very strong statement for them to get into this industry. And, and the first job they are trying to do is building a decent VR headset.
Well, yeah. I'm sure Alvin will agree to that. So which of these regions would you say would have the biggest potential market, and be it metaverse or the precursor to the metaverse at the moment? You mentioned just several countries just now. I guess South Korea would. My guess would be South Korea if you were saying they're very ahead of the game, ahead of the curve. But is that the case?
So actually, I'd like to jump in on that a little bit. I actually think that we're actually having this conference in Macau, or should be in Macau.
Should be.
So we're in the China region, and I really believe that China will probably be the first market globally to have a nationwide billion-person metaverse experience available to its population, and there's multiple reasons why that is, and I think that one of the biggest reasons is the interest of the government to actually support this to happen. Right? If you look at what's happening in pretty much everywhere else in the world, the standardization and the push for this to happen is all happening in the private sector. Right, so it's standards organizations trying to get hundreds of companies to agree on something, which I just mentioned was very difficult. But in China, what's happening is that from a national level, from provincial level, and from a city level, there are now initiatives where the country will spend billions of dollars or more, or tens of billions of dollars, to incentivize a metaverse to accelerate. And maybe in particular regions or particular cities, but in general, they're trying to get people to coalesce around this theme and develop new innovations and use cases. And I think one of the good things about China, that the users, is that they're very willing to adopt new technologies. If you see what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years with mobile payments, with mobile social, with electric vehicles, et cetera, the adoption of these technologies happens first in China and happens at scale. And what we're going to find is that China is will be able to deliver that. And they will be able to enforce it so that the companies actually follow a common standard. And the good thing is that there's already a lot of standards currently available in China that isn't available in the rest of the world. So for instance, we have a unified ID system in China, the 身份证, or a lot of times linked to your phone number, and that's what people use the 实名制, right? So there's a real name login for almost all the websites and social in China. It's already there, right? So you've already gotten a common ID system across all of the sites. You have a common currency system. In the rest of the world, people are debating, should I use Ethereum or Solana or Bitcoin or US dollar or whatever as the currency? And in China, it's going to be the digital RMB. Right. So that you've solved the currency and the finance issue. You also have the most advanced network in the world in terms of 5G and gigabit Ethernet to the home and fiber to the home. It's deployed better here than pretty much anywhere else in the world. Maybe in a smaller scale in South Korea probably has also very good networks. But something like 60% of all towers in the world, 5G towers, are in China. Right? So I think those kind of conditions are making China very, very ready to deploy these kind of networks, and the carriers have a real incentive to support that to happen. Right? The government has an incentive, and it's part of the 14th five-year plan. It's part of all of these city initiatives. There's I think 20 plus cities or provinces that have metaverse initiatives already announced. And so these kind of things just are not happening in the rest of the world. So when you can get rid of the social aspects and the technical aspects that are the obstacles to creating a interoperable metaverse, I think China definitely has the right conditions for it to enable it to happen. And when you have something that has 1 billion people into this virtual space where you can jump around worlds, you learn a lot. You learn behavior changes. You learn new business models. You learn new devices that people will need, right? And that's why if you look at the innovation in the mobile space in the last 10 years, a lot of that's been happening in China, because China's been able to get that almost billion person type of a a mobile internet and mobile payment system that isn't available in the rest of the world.
That's a very good point. Sushi, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, actually, I can't agree more on that. I think, China has the right, in several aspects. If you look at, compared to 15 years ago, right now in the supply chain, in the talent, in the market size and the policy, I think, that put China into one of the great potential market for Metaverse, being a network where billions of people can be in it. I think, China definitely has a unique opportunity to be leading this industry. And but I also want to say this is also, again, 5 to 10 years ahead of us. And how we actually going to evolve from today to that leaves a lot of new questions and opportunities as well. And usually, the competition in China market is also, spicier compared to other countries, in my opinion. So they also, it might take several iterations before we finally get to the stage where we feel comfortable as, the Metaverse, maybe in the future. So, but it's really, I think it's very exciting times for us. And, especially, being a company right now in this industry, I think it's a good thing for us.
Very good. I think that would be a good point for us to wrap up this panel. Once again, Alvin, Sushi, thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person in the very near future. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you.
Thank you for having us. Yep. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.